saying, okay, great. So, as I was saying, I'm Kitty Bravo. I'm the Director of Education for the Center for Guided Montessori Studies, and I am a board member for Sarasota University. And tonight's event is our May Colloquium, where we gather together to explore topics that are important for Montessori and education and life. And so I welcome you tonight. We have a very distinguished guest, and my dear friend Jonathan Wolff will be here, and I'll tell you a little more about him in a minute. Also with us tonight is Dr. Robin Howe, who is the Director of Education for Sarasota University, and Ellen Lassinger, who is the admissions coordinator for Sarasota University and on the CGMS admin team. And so let me just take a minute to tell you a little bit about Sarasota University in case you don't know who we are. We are a university offering right now master's programs, a master's in Montessori education and a master's in Montessori leadership. And we are the only university that is run by completely by Montessorians and really striving to be a Montessori university, looking at how do we apply Montessori philosophy to the next plane of development beyond the 4 planes that we normally consider when we think of early, infant, toddler, early childhood, elementary, and secondary, and then we move into adulthood. So how do we meet the needs of adults in a respectful way? The university is also focused on partnership and partnership studies and on strengths-based learning. So, excuse me, again, tonight we have Jonathan Wolff with us. And Jonathan has been a Montessori educator for a long, long time, over 40 years. He started off as an early childhood teacher and did that for many years. He's been a head of school, and for now many years, as long as I've known you, John, you have been a consultant and teacher educator. And he brings to any meeting I've ever been in with him, in any webinar or workshop, he brings his wonderful sense of humor and his great wisdom and deep understanding of the inner work that we all need to do to be prepared as teachers. So I'll say no more and turn it over to John. Ellen and I will be watching the chat room and watching for any questions you may have, and we want this to be informal, so feel free to use in the reaction section, you can raise your hand, we'll watch for it, and you're welcome to ask questions and share comments throughout the session. John, take it away.
Thank you, Kitty, for your gracious introduction. I appreciate it. Your friendship is always valuable and valued. So let me bring up PowerPoint here. And before I do that, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do and the gifts that you give to young people, to the teachers and administrators and families in your schools and teacher education. Thank you. There we go. Okay. So I've entitled this "The Language of Gratitude and Celebration," which I know is a little vague. So let me share what my hopes and dreams are and outcomes for this discussion this evening. Montessori was one of the first people, I believe, who, without doing the research in positive psychology that's come out over the past few years, was a positive psychologist. Let me share a couple of my favorite Montessori quotes, which I neglected to put into the PowerPoint, but I'll share them slowly. And if you think they resonate for you, you can write them down. But she was very much of a positive and forward thinker. She was not about looking at human beings, children or adults, from a standpoint of problems or deficit thinking. She was looking at human potential for making the earth a better place. So some of my favorite of her positive psychology, forward-thinking quotes are, the Montessori teacher is looking for the child who is not yet there. The Montessori teacher is looking for the child who is not yet there. We certainly accept and assess and observe the current needs and tendencies of students, but she's asking us also to create a vision of normalization or empowerment. What does little or big Jonathan look like at the next level of their development? And she's asking us to actually blueprint that, which is so in line with current research in positive psychology. In my training, Mother Isabel, who was trained by Dr. Montessori, used to remind us that Maria Montessori said, teach teaching, not correcting. Teach teaching, not correcting. When I do parent education, I often try to remind parents that our philosophy with their children in a classroom is we generally try not to focus children's attention on their objectionable behavior or their learring obstacles.
No, they can't see anybody. They can't even see me. Deb Matejevich is on this call.
He needs to be muted. We good? Anyway, I often say to parents, we do not focus your children's attention on the objectionable behaviors or the learning obstacles. We try to focus your child's attention on the behavior and learning objectives. You know, it's that old, don't run. No, it's not only please walk, but let me show you how I walk carefully to the door. And the last Montessori quote, which is, I think, perhaps my favorite of her poetic statements, is, the teacher must learn to appreciate and gather in all those tiny and delicate manifestations of the opening life in the child's soul. The teacher must learn to appreciate and gather in all those tiny and delicate manifestations of the opening life in the child's soul. But what I think she's asking us to do here is, yeah, be honest about where big or little Jonathan is today, but you are also looking for potential. You are also constantly looking for potential. So to be in line with this philosophy, if we are trying to not only look at honestly at where students are at today, but given their needs, tendencies, interests, talents, where could they be at tomorrow or in the afternoon work period? Does that same principle of positive celebration and envisionment apply to our work with adults? If I'm a head of school or a teacher educator, do I both need to be very objective and honest about what I'm seeing in the needs and tendencies of the adult learners? And do I also need to have some kind of a envisionment or blueprint of what does this adult look like at the next level of knowledge, skill, awareness, functioning? It's really the same principle with adults. So we're going to take a look at the power of positive thinking tonight with students, with fellow faculty, staff and faculty, with parents, and guess what? With ourselves. Because I'm a firm believer in that spirit of the spiritual preparation of the adult, then unless I'm practicing positive self-talk, it may not ever come out as positive envisionment or positive communications with the people I serve, whether they be little people or bigger people. I actually have to practice that in my own relationship with myself. In classrooms and in school communities, of how we give people positive feedback. And by the way, I didn't say praise, I'm not talking about good job, but how we give people who are working on confidence and the development of competence, their own confidence and their own skill, how we give them meaningful feedback, whether they're students or staff or parents, in a way that helps them gain greater confidence and greater awareness of the progress that they've made. And also how we can receive feedback from others in a gracious way. So that's sort of the ultimate objective. All right, moving right along. So I'd like to share a poem with you, and you'll notice this poem has the word God in it. So if you don't happen to believe in a supreme being, don't worry, because I think the poem stands on its own even without the word God. This is one of my favorite E.E. Cummings poems about, again, celebrating the best. I thank you, God, for this most amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and of wings, and of the gay, great happening illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the no of all nothing, human merely being, doubt unimaginable you? And now the ears of my ears are awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are open. Bring that a little bit. Why don't you take a look at it for a moment? This was so. One of the things that is a very hot topic in positive psychology is the concept, and in leadership, actually, in organizational leadership, and I think also in teaching, is sometimes when we say something in one way and then reframe it in another way, it takes a whole other, takes on a whole other meaning. As you know, there are some people who look at the pain or the suffering or their mistakes or their failures in their life as, you know, something absolute. Like, this must say something about my intelligence or the goodness of my being. And then there's some of us that are working on, wait a minute, mistake is a learning opportunity. I need to be honest that I didn't do this as well as I could as an adult or as a student, teacher, or leader, but this is an opportunity for learning. So that's just a really quick example of taking something that might be framed as a negative, as a self-limiting thought, and flipping it around to something that is now unlimited. This is a potential for growth and learning and self-improvement. So I have a few sort of very simplistic questions for you before we get into the heart of this matter, and then get your thoughts. And I'm not expecting answers here. This is not a confessional. But I think in terms of how we perceive things, so is your first thought that this is the sun setting, not that there's anything wrong with the setting sun, or is it a sun rising? Is this the end of summer or the beginning of fall? Different ways of framing the same event, and how those different thought frameworks of how we look at ourselves, students, the people we serve as leaders and educators, how we frame that growth potential may create a completely different energy and a different learning environment according to how we frame potential and work. This is always the classic one. There's a very interesting piece of research. There's a group, if you want to Google them, some of you know about these people, called the Heart Math people. Heart, and then without a space, capital M-A-T-H, Heart Math. And they have really looked for years now at the psychological and physiological effects of an attitude of gratitude. And they've come up with some really pretty startling research. They did one piece of research that I read about years ago, that apparently people who don't have heart disease, nonetheless, certain people's hearts go arrhythmic. They go out of electrical timing and then return to, you know, electrical timing. They become arrhythmic. And so the people at Heart Math looked at arrhythmia. And this is not any kind of cardiovascular disease. It was just electrical missing the beat of the heart. And they looked at some obvious things like diet, exercise, et cetera, et cetera. But then they started to look at states of mind that might have an effect upon the rhythm or arrhythmia of a human heart. And they eventually got to 2 states of mind that if you can hang on to them in some form, there will be a tendency that one's heart will be more electrically timed and rhythmic. And one state of mind was love. That can be love for anything, love for work, love for family, love for God, love for exercise. And the other was gratitude. That for whatever bizarre reason, people who are able to maintain and practice and express, it's really become part of their mental lifestyle, a sense of, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for this person. I'm grateful for this experience that was difficult that I went through. Here's what I learned. People who can maintain an attitude of gratitude tend to have more electrically timed hearts. It's like, whoa, interesting. So, and this is not, again, a confessional, but I'd like you to just momentarily think about and do a little introspection. What are your gratitudinal tendencies? And I'm going to suggest you look at this not theoretically. Recall some times where you've gone through a personal challenge or a conflict that initially, whether it's in a classroom or in a school or in your family or health-wise, makes no difference, but it's been stressful and painful. What has been your position about that? Just some questions to dwell on. I'm not under the delusional thought that when initially pain or conflict or suffering hits a human being, regardless of how old you are, most of us don't immediately go, well, gosh, that's painful. I wonder what the opportunity is. I mean, that would be a little bit ridiculous. The question is, I'm in pain, but how quickly do we get to a point, or at what point, or how long does it take us to get to a point, whether it's in our classrooms when things are not going well with students, or in our relationship if you're a school leader or a faculty member with fellow staff or with parents, and there's a breakdown and there's some pain and hurt feelings, beyond the initial response of like, ouch, how long does it take us to get to, okay, I honor the fact that this is painful, feelings are hurt, I'm really frustrated as all hell. And now, what's the opportunity here? What's the universe trying to show me? What's the potential for my growth? One of my all-time favorite aphorisms, and I can't attribute it because I can't find who said it. Maybe you'll be able to Google it and find it, is the fool remembers the experience and forgets the lesson. The wise one forgets the experience and remembers the lesson. I'll say it again. The fool remembers the experience and forgets the learning or the lesson. The wise one forgets the experience and remembers the lesson. Do you know some adults, or do you know yourself sometimes, where we hang on to painful experiences longer than maybe we need to? I mean, it's gone beyond grieving. It's like, now I'm just obsessing and feeling sorry for myself, or beating myself or beating somebody else up because it's not working. And it takes me a long time if I ever get to, okay. So you've honored the pain, you've honored the suffering, you've honored the conflict. So what are you going to take away from it? Is there an opportunity to get better? I'm at a charter school next week where there's been a huge breakdown of communications because some major changes in their secondary program that freaked out faculty and freaked out parents. It's a big charter school. And yeah, the communications and the decision-making could have been handled much better, but I'm building into the community meeting not only things that the communications committee and the board are planning on doing better, like this is what we've learned about communications and decision-making for the parents and teachers to see. We've learned some lessons here, but at the very end of the community meeting, I'm asked people to actually introspect on, if I were to review how I responded to these breakdowns myself personally, whether it's on social media or on the phone talking to people or emails or in person in the car line, would I do anything differently that would create more learning for me and more harmony for the community? So I'm actually ending the community meeting that I'm facilitating with like, yeah, there's some systems things that need to be cleaned up here about decision-making and community. And we're going to look at some social norms, how we as adults partnering for children can, be a little more respectful when there's a breakdown. But I'm actually going to end it with, yeah, but so what's your opportunity? As you all know, we ask Montessori students to have community meetings that not only look at the culture of the classroom and social agreements to produce more learning, respect, concentration, harmony, but we also ask students, and what are you going to do better to bring these changes about? So we're going to end the meeting with that sense of like, okay, what can I do?
John, can I make a couple of comments?
Please, Kitty.
First of all, I'm reminded when you say that of probably 30 years ago in a workshop with you, when you asked the question, is it any accident that we have the children that we have in the classroom? And there have been times as an administrator when I've said, is it any accident I have the teachers that I have, or the parents that I have, we're all put in the situation where we have the best opportunity to grow. And I think that's important. And then the other thing I was thinking as you were talking about these gratitudinal tendencies is how it's when I attended the now going to be 2 summers ago, the retreat with you and Andrew, and one of the things that came out in one of the presentations was that this growth mindset or positive mindset is not always consistent in all areas of our life. And I've tended to consider myself a really pretty positive person, and that I look at things from a positive aspect, but that really, it like hit me hard, because I realized that there were a couple of areas in my life that I tend to not look from the positive, that I tend to look at the negative. And I think it's real important to look at where are the places where we tend to go to the objections more than we do the objectives.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing both of those. Kitty, I want to go back to your first point. I mean, it sounds a little California-esque and a little bit out there, but have you ever considered the wacky idea? And again, you don't need to believe in a supreme being, but could there be something going on in the universe where literally everybody gets the exact lesson that they need to get when it's time for them to get it? In other words, it's sort of like there's a cosmic director who's giving Jonathan Wolff an IEP. This is what you need this week. And even if there isn't, wouldn't that be a really cool thing to posit? That's like, obviously this is happening to me, so perhaps I need to look at what my issue is here. I'm going to give one quick, case study, and then I'd like to open this up to other comments, but based on what Kitty just shared. So, and I know some of you have had this experience or observed this experience in Montessori programs. So Jonathan Wolff is in somebody's classroom, and he's got lots of, learning issues and learning differences and behavior issues, and he's not really that engaged, and he's disengaging students. And Jonathan is just driving the teacher bonkers, okay? The next year, Jonathan goes to another classroom in the school, has a different teacher and is in a different classroom or program level. And Jonathan really hasn't transformed much of his needs and tendencies. He's still pretty disfocused and at times distracting and acting out. The first teacher meets the current teacher of Jonathan in the lunchroom or staff room. And the first teacher, who had Jonathan last year, says, "That kid is a real pill. I mean, he just drove me nuts." And the second teacher, who has Jonathan this year, says, "Jonathan's got some issues, but I'm fine with him." Who really had the issues there? The first teacher brought some baggage that was triggering her to be, or him, to be completely stressed out by Jonathan. The second teacher, with pretty much the same child and the same tendencies and issues, it says, yeah, Jonathan's husband's got some stuff going on, but I have no problem with him. It's like, well, there you go. What are we bringing to the table that maybe we need to clean up that has nothing to do with the student, the staff person, or the parent who also has their own learning, but like, what's my opportunity? Anybody want to make some additional comments on what we've kicked around thus far before we sort of drill this a little bit farther down? Any thoughts, any questions? Feel free to unmute or chat.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hey there.
When you talked about a cosmic director giving you your IEP and what if the universe is giving you exactly what you need? I think I've been a Montessorian for a long time, but I think my first real experience with that was when I had my son at 29 weeks. He was 2 pounds when he was born.
Oh, wow.
I now know why I'm such a type A organized person. It's the only way I can kind of manage myself. And I always say that. So it really resonated with me because he gave me exactly the lessons I needed to learn. When I met with the doctor, I, had this paper in my hand and I said, because I really wanted to have my child at home in a pool of water. And my husband coming from Mexico said, "You are out of your mind. You need to be in the hospital." So we met in the middle where I talked to my doctor and I said, "Can I have soft music? Can I have the lights low? Can I have," and he said, "Give me your list." So I gave it to him. And lo and behold, I end up in the hospital with blood pressure over 220 over 119 and an emergency C-section. And it was like this swamp of, I didn't have a room ready. I didn't have a shower. Nothing was in my control. And that was the first time in my life where I realized I'm not in control. This is not my game. I'm not the director here. I'm not even speaking from a spiritual sense as much as I have every lesson exactly the way I need to learn it at that moment from my son in that experience.
Wow.
So, and I've seen it over and over and over since then.
Yeah.
So it was the first time my eyes were open to it, I think. So thank you for that, because it really resonates with me. And
It's a beautiful case study. It reminds me of, and I know some of you have had this experience. I used to get certain personalities of children in my primary, my children's house classes, who would just drive me bonkers. A lot of times the whiners, "Oh, you can't do it." It's like, ugh. Yeah. And when I got a handle on why that made me crazy, what it was in my personality that made me crazy about these children's behaviors, and I really came to peace with myself, guess what? I didn't get those children anymore. I mean, it was really bizarre. It's like somebody was sending me these children to press my buttons. And once I got the lesson, it's like, okay, you don't need these types of kids in your classroom anymore. It's like, oh.
Well, the end of that is that there's been such a transformation in how I approach everything that I like myself so much better. So I feel like it was this gift, and he's 16. He still makes me crazy for so many reasons, right? He's like my toughest person I've ever encountered, because he's so much like me in so many ways. I don't want him to suffer, like, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
he's just, it's been amazing. Every time I get frustrated, I take that step back and say, he's exactly who I need in my life.
But Melissa, you also
exactly who I need to have. And
you also raised a really profound point that I want to reinforce. I notice in my life as a family person, as a friend, and as a teacher, educator, and consultant, that if I can't get to a place of like, okay, what's the lesson for me? What's my responsibility? What's my learning? I tend to either go to self-blame, "You made a mess of this, Wolff," and demean myself, or I blame it on somebody else. Well, that person is just out to lunch. So I think when we're working with human beings, whether it's young people or fellow staff or parents, if we can come to a sense of personal responsibility, what the opportunity for learning is for me, we become less blaming and judgmental of others, less judgmental of ourselves and less judgmental of others, because we're able to assume our responsibility and don't need to point fingers here or there. Kristen, thank you, Melissa. Kristen. Or Tristan, I'm sorry, I'm not reading well.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to point out that there was a workshop during the AMS conference this year I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but it was Martha, Teien, Martha Tain, from Colorado. And her workshop was collaborating with parents or employees with an appreciative inquiry walkabout. And she was talking about appreciative leadership, and instead of focusing on problems, essentially what you were talking about is switching it around to see the possibilities. And that's really helped me during my practicum advising meetings, is when the adult learners are coming with problems, switching it around to find the solutions immediately. And I found just using that positive language has really helped to redirect the adults into thinking positively about what is going on in their situations in school. So I just wanted to share that too. I found that workshop really helpful. And so I appreciate you talking about it tonight too.
Yeah, for those of you who are not familiar with the thinking and decision-making and planning model of appreciative inquiry, Google it and read about it. It's really in alignment with positive thinking, positive envisionment, and it's about opportunities for growth. It's not about obstacles. Any last thoughts before we move on? I want to build on something that Tristan said, but I don't want to cut anybody else off. Anybody have another thought on this concept of positive framing for learning? All right, Tristan, that was a perfect intro to the next slide. Thanks. I want to talk for just a moment about the basic constructs of something, if you're not familiar with it, called positive psychology. For many, many years, psychologists were about helping people who are unhappy and miserable be happy. And then a gentleman from the University of Pennsylvania, Martin Seligman, a professor there, stood up as the president of the American Psychology Association and said, why don't we also study the kinds of thinking habits that produce happiness? You know, why are we so focused on the pathology of all these unhappy people and how to make them happy, which is a very important service? Why don't we do preventive medicine? What is the habit of thinking, or the habits of thinking, or attitude or mindsets that produce a state of well-being? And that opened up the doorway to an entire new field called positive psychology. Martin Seligman is about 90 years old. I have a colleague at the University of Pennsylvania. Some of you know Dr. Dana Kamenstein, who just ran into Martin Seligman at a conference at Penn, and he said it was a charming conversation. There are two basic constructs in positive psychology in terms of mental or psychological framing or practice. One is celebrate your life. Celebrate what went well this week or in the classroom today, or what's going well in the school. Increments of progress. Celebrate, thank you for this opportunity. Celebrate things that are, you know, are feeling good, are getting better, are being successful, increments of progress before we go to problems, and then envision building on those increments and next week or tomorrow making them even better. So there, in positive psychology, there is no problem orientation at all. This is what we've built this week in the classroom or in our school or in my relationships with people. And now I'm going to build it out even more. It's the opposite of what psychologists call deficit thinking. And by the way, this is not a denial of problems. I have a little model for parent-teacher conferences where I propose to teachers in conferencing that they follow the rule of the 3 Ps. The first thing you want to share with parents at a conference is a unique quality of that child. Let me tell you a wonderful story about what your daughter Kitty did the other day with a fellow student, or how she had a breakthrough in math. And this is such an example of her tenacity or empathy. So sharing a unique aspect of a child's personality in a parent-teacher conference. Then reviewing, the next P is review the progress the child has made developmentally and academically. And then instead of framing the problems that little Kitty is having, like the hitting problem as opposed to getting, using words, say, and our plans now is to help Kitty transition to share her thoughts and feelings and needs with language and not physically. That's our plan for your child. You notice there has been no statement of, Houston, we have a problem. Your daughter has a problem with hitting, but we're addressing the hitting as a framing of a potential that we're going to work on for the child. It's just a reframing. All right, we're gonna dig a little deeper here. Five different avenues of gratitude and appreciation. And as you look at these, and as I kind of walk through each one, we've got a slide on each of these. I want you to think about this, not cross-culturally, but across all populations of human beings and interactions. You can look at this as to, do I do enough of this with young people, with students? Do I do enough of this kind of feedback with fellow faculty, especially the people I teach with in the classroom? Do I do enough of these positive feedback forms with parents and families and caregivers? Do I do enough with the school administration? And importantly, do I do enough of these positive messagings with myself? So just some sample language here. And as you can see, this could be applied to a young person, a student, applied to an adult, or applied to yourself. You don't need me reading to you. Take a look at them. I'm a firm believer that I think we have a little messy confusion in Montessori about feedback. We certainly don't want to do good job and make children emotionally dependent upon adults, or for that matter, adults dependent upon their bosses. Like, am I doing a good job? Will you give me a good job today? It builds emotional dependency, and it doesn't give people any data about, well, what was the good job that I did? It's just sort of a playing God and go, well, I'm telling you, you did a good job. However, do you work with people in your schools or training centers or classrooms? Do you work with young people or adults who in certain areas of their life, this kind of gets back to Kitty's point about we all have areas of growth. Do you have people that you know, including yourself, who in certain areas of their functioning lack confidence and lack competence? I don't think I've ever met a human being who in certain areas of functioning, of life functioning, was not in this area, they weren't totally confident in their abilities and they needed some further skills. So the question is, if we know that human beings, adults and children, in certain areas of their learning and life and functioning and work, may not be confident, and their confidence is lacked on, well, they don't have all the knowledge and skills yet, they haven't applied the learning, then do people need feedback on their accomplishments? Did you notice, Kitty, that today you put all of your work away at the end of the work period and nobody had to remind you? What did you think about that, Kitty? And thank you for really helping to restore our environment. That to me is profound feedback based on that I'm observing that little or big Kitty has not mastered the confidence or the skill of internalizing the ability to restore her work. And so when I see her do it, I'm going to give feedback to that accomplishment. Any questions about appreciating giving feedback to young people or adult people about things you've seen them accomplish? Anything you want to ask or share? Kitty, you're going to need to monitor hands up or the chat because I've got the PowerPoint up. I can't see everybody.
We're good.
I'm watching.
Okay. Then in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to a subtler one. I want to give it a little analogy here before I talk about progress. If I climb Mount Everest and I take months to climb Mount Everest, it's, literally taking me months of preparation and months of arduous climbing, and I finally get to the summit. And Kitty and Robin fly by in a Sikorsky helicopter when I'm standing at the summit with my flag after months of arduous climbing. And they slide open the door of the helicopter and they go, John, congratulations, you climbed Mount Everest. I'm going to look at Kitty and Robin and say, I'm standing on the summit. I see that I did that. I really don't need your feedback about something I just accomplished. But you know, when I was at Camp 6 or Camp 3, and I was really struggling with bad weather, it would have been really nice to get your feedback and like, John, you're making good progress here, stand with it. So the question is, are we sometimes over-focused with human beings, young people and adult people, of giving feedback when they finally finish something? What's more powerful? Giving people feedback about their accomplishment or letting them know you've seen their progress and you want to celebrate their progress? So take a look at a couple of the prompts here on this page. And as you can see, I framed these as a teacher saying this to a student, but again, I want to reiterate, this could be a lead teacher saying this to a new associate or assistant or a co-teacher. It could be a head of school or an instructional leader saying it to a faculty or staff member. It could be a teacher educator saying it to an adult learner. The principles are exactly the same. I'm just going to move on and we'll go through all 5 and then come back and see if you have any thoughts on these. Is this one an even subtler one? What's the power of saying to another human being who hasn't gotten to the top of Mount Everest, maybe even hasn't made a lot of progress, but they are patently making effort to improve, to learn, to be better in their life and relationships and learning? Would it be important at times to let people know, I really appreciate how hard you're working on this, and I want you to know I admire you for your work, your effort. Effort's even more subtle than progress, because there may be no progress, but the person is sincere in their intention to learn or improve or transform. Do they need to know that from people in their lives or in their classroom or in their schools? Just a couple more. I mentioned this at the beginning of parent-teacher conferences. One of the yoga teachers in my meditation group once said, the greatest thing you can say to another human being is, I believe in your capability, I believe in you. I'm not sure how you're going to solve this problem, but you've got the goods. And you've got the goods because you have these qualities of character or these personality traits. I know some teachers who, with some of their most difficult students, in addition to giving them some pretty strict structure and limits, at times have pulled them aside and said, you know, I really love your sense of humor. It really tickles me. It's a really special quality you have. Or sometimes you really take care of your friends. You know, your love and your heart and your empathy is really, really special. You notice the first 3 are about work or you know, something that a person's doing, accomplishment, progress, effort. This is about who they are. This is kind of like talking about their soul. Like, this is what I really value about you and why I love you in our classroom, because you bring this special quality. That's incredibly powerful. And that's why I suggest that teachers do that as a narrative, as a story at the beginning of a parent-teacher conference. Before I get into your child's progress and our plans for where we're going next with Kitty, let me share a story of something that is just really special about her character and personality. Once you lay that out to parents at the beginning of a parent-teacher conference, what's the feeling the parent's going to get? Wow, you really love my kid and you understand the unique quality of my child. It's very powerful. And then lastly, just going up to a student, and it doesn't need to be a student or a faculty member, a person who is always in agreement with you or is always in harmony with you. It can just be, I want to tell you, it's really important to me that you're in our classroom. If you weren't in our classroom, I would miss you. You're a very important part of our family, our community, our school. And I want to tell you that I so value you just being here every day. These are all really powerful affirmations. So just for a moment, before I open this up to discussion, I want to give you a moment to do a little introspection here. So we make this hopefully an applied learning experience. So I just did a quick review of these 5 forms of, you can call them gratitude, appreciation, acknowledgement, celebration, encouragement. We're all talking about the same thing. How we give people meaningful, positive feedback. And I'm going to ask you just for a moment to reflect on, in your work with students, if you're working with young people, or if you're an adult educator or a leader of adults, in your work with adults, including a lead teacher working with her classroom partners, rate yourself. I'm not going to ask for answers here, but I'd really like you to take a look at how broad or how multidimensional is your gratitude and appreciation along these lines with other people, as well as yourself. What are your tendencies? Just take a moment. But just for a moment, want to go back to the wise thing that Kitty just said a little while ago, which really resonated for me, which is, with certain people in certain situations, I may be good at all of these. And then there are other situations with other types of people or relationships where I'm not as multidimensional in how I share feedback, that I need to really work a little harder on being more positive and being more multidimensional, because these people have I have a different experience of these people, or in this situation, I'm not able to stay in this positive mode. So think about it also contextually to Kitty's point. Okay, I have nothing else to present. I would love to open this up to your thoughts, your ideas, things you've done in this spirit of positive framing, positive thinking, positive feedback, or any questions you'd like to pose. This is now your time for the next 10 minutes. That's all that I have to offer. Anybody want to share? Yes, Patricia.
Yes, yes. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you. Yeah, this is the first time hearing about this and learning about this. I found myself for the past year and a half really working and pushing and doing everything in the classroom for, trying to be very supportive to my coworkers and the students, and at home with my daughters. And now you're speaking and I realize, what about me? It's like you're in a race, and you're like, you see forward, but then you don't stop to what about appreciating yourself? And maybe, just maybe, if you do stop and say, oh, I did this and this was good, and make you feel better about yourself, and that will also you can give that back to the people that is around you as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You raised a really profound point. I want to ask you all a question that I think I'm seeing in the Montessori world over the last 40 years, but I may be wrong. Are there Montessorians who are a little too hard on themselves?
Mm-hmm.
A little too perfectionistic?
Oh, yes.
To Patricia's point, I'm in classrooms as a consultant where I will always start in the feedback to the teacher in that classroom or the teaching team. I really admired how you did that. And it seems like the kids are really working well in this area. And I love how you handled that. And you know what I'll get back? Yes, but this and this and this and this and this are not working well. And I'll go, whoa, time out. We're going to get to what you would like to make better and what I think you could do better. But first, we're going to celebrate what you're doing well. We are not going to the deficit thinking. There's one other thought that I have, and then I want to reopen this up. And I meant to say it earlier, and it went in one ear and out the other. It's a question. When a Montessori teacher stops for a moment to observe their classroom, not to do a serious investigative observation, but just to sort of take the pulse of the community and scan the classroom. Does the tendency of the Montessori teacher's brain first look for progress or first look for problems? Where does the brain go? Yeah. The natural tendency from our reptilian system, or whatever you want to call it, limbic system, is, oh my God, look what Robin's doing over there. And Kitty, she's been off task all day long. We tend to go to problems. And what positive psychology and Montessori is saying when she says, look for the child who's not yet there, is looking at your classroom and forcing your mind to go, I'm going to look for increments of progress first before I allow my brain to go to problems, is like swimming upstream. It is a counterintuitive act, to Patricia's point. And celebrating myself of what I did well this week in my classroom and my school community is somewhat counterintuitive, because the brain likes to go to problems, and you have to force yourself. I'm not going to deny the problems. I'm going to try to see them as opportunities, but I'm first going to do some celebration of increments of progress that I've seen in myself and others. And for me, at least, that takes a little work, because I can be pretty hard on myself. Melissa.
I was just going to say, what you're talking about is that negative human, the negative bias that humans have. And but you also mentioned yoga, and it's a practice, just like, yeah, right. It's not perfection, it's progress, and it's a practice.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And I like to encourage teachers to consciously take a break. It doesn't have to be long, but a few-minute break to have a gratitude observation where you look around the room for what is going right, and do when it's most important to do it is when you think everything is going wrong, when you're feeling really frazzled and it's chaotic and everything, is stop, take some deep breaths and look around the room at what's going well, because then you'll see there's actually more good going on than you thought. Then you can go to, all right, where do I need to go first? To help with whatever the issues are.
But it is counterintuitive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it, Kitty? I want to share something that I know a teaching team does, which is bringing humor into the mix. So think about this, if you would ever be willing to do this with a teaching partner. I know a teaching team that when the morning work period is going to hell in a handbasket, whether it's the day after Halloween or it's a full moon or whatever, but the children are just completely psychotic, things are breaking, nobody's really engaged, people are having breakdowns, and it's just not good. And nobody's dying, there's no arterial bleeding or flames, but it's just a really rotten work period. The assistant or teacher say to one another, let's get off the stage of the classroom and sit in the audience and watch the sitcom for a while. And they actually sit down in observation chairs and they go, look at those kids over there, they must be on drugs. And these kids over here, they haven't slept in weeks. And I don't think these children here ever ate any breakfast at all for years in their life. And you actually sit there and enjoy the tragic comedy of the classroom. And the two teachers sit there and just laugh about what's going on for about 2 minutes. And then once they're totally relaxed and detached from the scene, they go, okay, how are we going to divide and conquer? Then they talk about what to do, but they first relax themselves and just enjoy the insanity of it all. What a healthy thing to do. I wish I had done that as a teacher.
That is absolutely brilliant. I love this, John.
Yeah. I wish I had done that more as a teacher.
Well, I just want to share something. I've been out of the classroom for a good 5-6 years. And then I came back to Bermuda and I was asked to do, help with someone went on maternity. So I went in, after Corona, of course, the environment is a mess. But I said, okay, that's all right. And then I see all these kids sitting with a book doing math and language, and a 4-year-old is sitting in front of the division board and the multiplication board. The boy is rolling and throwing himself on the floor. And then I told the teacher, I think these guys need to move. They need to do table washing. They need, it's like, what's going on? The environment after Corona is, it's horrible. Oh my goodness. So I slowly brought in activities, and the kids that were basket cases, they're happy now. They are walking around, they are writing on the big whiteboard, they are sweeping. So it's amazing what happens to the environment and what happens to the children. It's crazy. But it was like, yeah.
But Maha, you've also brought in another element of reframing. When things are breaking down and students are being inappropriate or off task or, disrespectful, we can immediately go to, that's inappropriate behavior. You need to stop that. And I'm not suggesting we allow children to be disrespectful. We need to redirect them. But what you went to is, look, this is post-corona. What's the unmet need? If we're really looking for opportunities to serve the children, then we go to, how do we serve the need? We don't go to, this is inappropriate behavior. That's again judgmental.
Exactly.
Thank you, Maha. Hola, good to see you.
Good to see you, John. So I want to share something about spreading sense of humor, since you advised me to use that technique. So I have been applying it for weeks now. So I went for a walk with the kids to get an ice cream today. And one of our challenges was, let's line up and be safe around, and let's just be close to each other. So every time I was like, we agree before, we set the ground before we leave, but we end up, I called them, please line up, friends. Then I was like, okay, today I'm gonna use another technique. Hey, friends, you can't just walk away from the nuclei because I have the DNA, I have all the information you need. So you have to stay inside the animal cell. And you were like looking at me and smiling, and you were like, what? Yes. Then every time they were walking a little bit far away from me, I was like, I'm the nuclei, I'm having the DNA.
I love the metaphor.
Yeah, and it worked very well, actually.
But you brought up the humor thing. When we're really relaxed and willing to see the opportunity, we're much more relaxed to do humor. I saw a primary teacher walk over to a chair that a number of 5-year-olds were repeatedly not pushing in. Everybody who worked there left the chair out. And, the teacher did grace and courtesy lessons on putting chairs under tables and reminded the kids they just didn't give a darn. She walked over to the chair and had a conversation with the chair while these kids were watching. She said, excuse me, chair, is this where you're supposed to be? This is not where you're supposed to live. You don't just sit out here in the middle of the floor. And she walked away. And the 5-year-olds kind of looked at each other and it's like, has she lost it? And they put the chair back under the table. It's like, oh my God, that's brilliant teaching. But that came from a place of, think about it, positive, relaxed energy. You can't be creative and adaptive or fun with kids if you're like,
yes, agitated. Yeah.
Well, John, it is 7:59 and I know you have to scoot out right away. And so we'll say thank you to you for bringing us to a place of appreciation and highlighting how we can bring that to our life and our work. So thank you so much, John.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation with all of you. Thanks for the opportunity. Be well.
Thank you, John.
So I want, before everybody else leaves, I know John has to go right away. Let me mention that Ellen is putting or has already put into the chat a link to a form you can use, a reflection form. If you would like to get an hour of professional development for this, just send us the reflection form and we'll send you a professional development certificate. And we all need those, and you've spent this hour, so let's get the credit for it. Also, again, I'd want to thank
I have not done dinner yet.
I want to thank everyone again for joining us, and let you know that Sarasota University is now enrolling for our August session, and we'll begin a new term at that time. And again, we offer the Master's in Montessori Education and a Master's in Montessori School Leadership. And those of you who have a Montessori credential are able to apply that credential towards credits for your Master's and come and learn more with Montessorians. And that's all I have for tonight. Eleanor, Robin, anything else you want to add?
I just want to say, if you're interested in enrolling for the August session, I do have a code for a waived application fee. So just email me. You'll all get an email from me tomorrow anyway with the recording. I'll also send you the link for the reflection form if you want PD credit for this. And you can just reply to that if you'd like to, but I do have a code for it.
Next
Thank
month,
you, Ellen.
in June, we'll have Tammy Esting is going to present the colloquium on awe and wonder, how we can develop awe and wonder in our learning and help support children in that. And it should be a great evening as well. And that's, Ellen, do you know what the actual date of that? It's the third Wednesday, June. Looks like that's 21st, I believe.
Mhm.
And we'll send out links for that and reminders for that. So we hope you can join us for that. Then we're going to take a break and not offer the colloquium in July and August. And in September, we'll have Julia Volkman on the third Wednesday talking about neuroscience and Montessori and learning. So please join us. They're lots of fun. Debica.
Anybody is going to the 29th International Congress in Thailand?
I am not going this year, but how are you going?
Yes,
How wonderful.
I am.
So I
Anybody
hope
else is going
Anybody going to the Congress in
from
Bangkok?
CGMS? So we can be, we can meet there. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Now, if you're going, put your name real quick in the chat and your email, and Deborah can connect with you.
Okay.
All right. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight, and we look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine. And
Thank you. It was nice to see you all.
Yes.